Hello, welcome back to Master Duel. Another day means another deck, and today we're gonna talk about Sky Striker Orcust, which Sky Striker Orcust was a deck that was only, I think, discovered about 3 to 4 weeks before it got completely slammed on the January 2020 ban list, with Harporer being banned and Engage getting banned. And the funny thing is, it won 2 YCSs back to back, and you might think, how did it not discovered previously? Well, I think the thing is that Orcust and Sky Striker inherently don't seem like they have a lot of synergy. Sky Striker cards, you need a lot of spell cards for it. You can't have monsters in your main monster zone, and Orcust is just your regular sort of mid-range control deck, maybe somewhat of the Tri-Brigade deck before Tri-Brigade. People found out that Sky Striker is a super strong engine and Orcust is a super strong engine, and you can literally just put them together and it won't even matter because they're both so powerful on their own. And it's just mad, right? You even have a few spells from the Orcust archetype that support this sort of idea, I guess, which is Orchestrated Return, which is Babel to some degree, which of course this is mostly on the field, but you can get access to these cards through your engine, so that's kind of nice. And Orchestrated Return lets you draw cards, lets you draw potentially into Engage a bit more often, which this card is at 2 in Master Duel, and in the OCG I also believe so. In the TCG, of course, being at 1 now, recently getting unbanned. I remember in 2019 at YCS Milan, when I was there, a young Julian, I talked to friends about, this deck and how you could maybe do some funny things with it. And one of the things we realized was that there's a certain card in Yu-Gi-Oh! Which is my favorite card of all time in terms of gameplay, which is Orbital Hydralander, that this card has a bit of weird synergy in this deck. And that's why we're going to try this deck out. I wanted to give it some spice for you guys, and I also think this is super fun to play around with, right? If you're like me and you like Thunder Dragons, you have to throw in boss monsters in every deck you pretty much see, and Orbital Hydralander is one of those crazy boss monsters. Let's read this card before talking about why this card is so good in the deck. It cannot be normal summoned or set. It must be special summoned from your hand by having 5 or more monsters in your grave, with no monsters in your grave having the same name. This is quite specific, right? Once per turn, as a quick effect, you can send the top 3 cards from your deck to the grave as cost, and then destroy a card on the field, non-targeting. But you must have at least 2 monsters in your grave and no monsters in your grave with the same name to activate and to resolve this effect. So it pretty much means that if you mill the 3 cards, before milling the 3 cards and after the milling the 3 cards, you are not allowed to have cards or monsters with multiple the same names in your grave. Now, why does this work so well in the deck? Well, let's talk about the obvious one first. We have a Sky Striker engine in here with Hornet Drones that can itself, as a 1-card combo, summon out 4 different monsters with different names. So you just have to normal summon any monster, link them off, and the Orbital Hydralander is live. We try to play a lot of one-offs. That is one of the trade-offs we have to make when we play with Orbital Hydralander in the deck, right? We cannot take any chances and play multiples of hand traps or anything. But we have to play multiples of the Orcust engine. We have to play multiple Orcust Nightmare and Orcust Symbol Skeleton in order to draw them with Orchestrated Return. The thing is, that's so funny and cool. Actually, 2 things with the Orcust engine. Let's talk about this one first, where Orchestrated Babel makes it so your Orcust effects become quick effects in the grave. We'll go over the Orcust effects in just a minute, but you will see that they can banish themselves from the grave to activate various different effects, right? You always banish the Orcust monsters from the grave, and you do various stuff. Now, as they become quick effects, if you have the field spell on the field, well, you special summon the Orbital Hydralander, you have an Orcust Nightmare in your grave, maybe 4 other different monsters, and you activate the Orbital Hydralander to mill 3 cards as a quick effect and destroy a card on the field, and you mill a second Orcust Nightmare with the effect of Hydralander. You can actually, in the same chain, because Orbital Hydralander uses it as cost, mills the card as cost, you can chain the Orcust Nightmare that you just milled, banish it from the grave, and activate its effect. So you can get the monsters out of the grave before the Orbital Hydralander resolves, and that way get it live. So that's so awesome, and it's so funny that it works so well. And the other thing that is even funnier in my opinion is that this is a Dark Machine monster. Now, all the Orcust monsters are Dark Machine monsters. Usually that wouldn't really matter, I mean, unless you play some non-engine Dark Machine support. But the thing is, Orcust Crescendo is the main trap card of Orcust. It's a counter trap. It's very similar to Solemn Judgment, but banishes the card as well. But it has a second effect where you can banish it from the grave to add a Dark Machine monster that is either banished or in your deck to your hand. normal summon Girsu, send the Crescendo from the deck to the grave, and add the Hydralander to your hand. Also, as a follow-up turn, if you go into your Galatea, we'll go into that in a second, and you can then set any of the spell traps from the Orcust archetype to your field. You can set the Crescendo, activate it during their turn to negate anything, and then on your turn you can banish it from the grave to search an Orbital Hydralander. So this card has super neat synergy. Of course, we have to respect that this is a bomb. It is sometimes a brick, you know. So does it make the deck less consistent? For sure. Is it still so much fun to play around with and can sometimes win you the game out of nowhere? Definitely, right? And this is a card that sometimes it is the win condition you really need to push for damage, right? And to have this interruption, because this also, if you draw it, adds another layer of interruption to your board. Also, funny thing, you could search this with Chaos Space, in theory, because it's a level 8 that cannot be normal summoned or set, a dark monster, but we obviously don't play light monsters, so you cannot search this card. Like I said, it's one of my favorite cards of all time, and I really wanted to show this deck off. Of course, we don't have maybe as much space for non-engine cards. Probably one of the best standalone going second cards. Being able to draw this with any hand and potentially play through a board with only Droplet in your hand is super nice. Let's talk about the Orcust engine, right? We've already been so long into the deck guide and haven't even talked about the Orcust engine at all. So basically how this works is you want to get any Orcust monster plus any other monster on the field, make Galatea, use its effect to get advantage, set a spell trap from your deck to your field, then go into Dingirsu and use Dingirsu and any other monster to go into IP Masquerena. How does this look in practice? For example, Armageddon Knight is a card. When this card is summoned, you can send a dark monster from your deck to the grave. We have Orcust Harp Horror, which Orcust Harp Horror is a card where it says, if it's banished from the grave, you can banish it from the grave to special summon any Orcust monster from your deck. So you can send the Orcust Harp Horror, you can special summon the Orcust Nightmare from the deck, and then you use the Armageddon Knight and the Orcust Nightmare to make your Galatea, which needs 2 effect monsters, is a Link 2 monster, including at least 1 Orcust monsters. Orcust Nightmare has an effect where you can banish it from your grave to target any monster you control, and send a Dark Machine monster from your deck to the grave, and the targeted monster gains the attack equal to the level of the sent monster. So you use the Nightmare to send World Legacy World 1. Now this is not an Orcust card, but it still is inherently working with the Orcust engine, because it says you can banish this card from your grave once again and target a banished Orcust monster, special summon it. So that means you can send this with your Orcust Nightmare by banishing it, and then banishing the World 1 to special summon back the Orcust Nightmare. Now at this point you have a Galatea on the field. The Galatea says you can target one of your banished machine monsters, shuffle it into the deck, and then set an Orcust spell trap directly from your deck. We have 3 options in our deck to set. We have Orchestrated Babel, which is our main win condition / option we go for. It makes all the Orcust monsters in the grave quick effects. So that means as a quick effect you can special summon one from the deck with Harp Horror, as a quick effect you can send one from your deck to the grave, or as Symbol Skeleton says, as a quick effect you could special summon an Orcust monster from the grave by banishing it. That is the one effect. It has another effect where during your main phase, if it's in the grave, except the turn it was sent there, you can send a card from your hand to the grave and add it back to your hand. So that's a neat little side effect, not the main thing we focus on though. Another card is Orchestrated Return. It's also an Orcust card because it says Orcust rated. Send a Orcust monster or World Legacy monster from your hand or face-up field to the grave. So that means any Orcust monster or the World Legacy one also works with it. Draw 2 cards. Super simple. This draws you into your Sky Striker engine. This draws you into your Orcust cards, and it gets you your Orcust cards in the grave in the meantime. Because one of the issues about Orcust is sometimes that it can break, right? If you draw too many Orcust monsters, you just, like, if you draw multiple Nightmares, of course, it's just bad, right? It doesn't do anything in the hand. And the third one is Orcust Crescendo. We've already talked about this card, so I don't have to explain it anymore, but yeah, you can also put this on the field, and you need an Orcust Link monster on the field to have this Solemn Judgment-esque effect live. We also have Longirsu as an Orcust Link monster. It's a Link 3 monster, and this has some neat effects, but they don't come up too often, so this is not the card you will always go for, but sometimes you can target 2 of your banished machine monsters, shuffle them into the deck, then you can send 1 linked monster your opponent controls to the grave. This also becomes a quick effect, of course, with Orchestrated Babel, and a linked monster means that an arrow and link arrow is pointing towards the monster, or the monster is pointing towards another monster with a link arrow. So if in any way a monster is connected with a link arrow to another monster, it's linked. The last one, the most important one you could say, is Dingirsu, which this card can only be special summoned once per turn, and you can just slam this in comparison to other Exceed monsters. The difference is you can just slam this on any Orcust Link monster you control. So literally you just summon an Orcust Link monster, and then summon the Dingirsu on top of it. That's something you can do. This has a couple of neat effects. If a card you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you could detach one material from this card instead. So pretty much you're protected, just like with Colossus, for example. And if this card is special summoned, you can activate one of these effects. Now, both of these effects are broken. Send one card your opponent controls to the grave. Non-target sending is just about the best removal you can get. And then attach one of your banished machine monsters to this card as material. So on your first turn, you will use this second effect. And if you go second or on your third turn, you will use this first effect here. So this can be a defensive or, not a defensive, but an extensive play. Or extensive card, but it can also be an aggressive card. So Dingirsu is super, super good. Now let's talk about the Sky Striker engine and why it's so good in this deck. So you play 2 Engage as a main card, of course, as you want to draw. You add a Sky Striker card from your deck to your hand, and then you can draw 1 card if you have 3 spells in your grave. The options I chose to go for the cards that we can add of Engage are Hornet Drones, which is mandatory. Then Widow Anchor, which is sort of mandatory, I suppose. 1 Afterburner, that's something we always played in the TCG. This targets a face-up monster on the field, destroy it. Then if you have 3 or more spells in the grave, you can destroy a spell and trap in addition to that on the field, on resolution. Really nice card, but even better in my opinion is Jamming Waves. Many of you commented on the last videos that you feel like we need more back row removal in the decks in general, in the Thunder Dragon decks, in the Unchained deck that I just showed off. And I feel you, I think that Eldritch is becoming more popular on the ladder, so that's something we want to focus on if possible, and Jamming Waves is an ideal tool in my opinion. So the great thing is that Jamming Waves is basically the opposite of Afterburner. Target a set spell trap on the field, destroy it, and then if you have 3 or more spells in the grave, you can destroy a monster as well on the field. So this deals with random back row, that you can just slam this and destroy the back row. And then with Kagari, which says if it's special summoned, you can target a Sky Striker spell and add it back to your hand, which this we can summon by using our Hornet Drones token. We can get back the Jamming Waves and destroy additional cards and basically bait out their interruptions. And I think you can already get an idea of why the Sky Striker engine is so good, because this just baits out interruption most of the time. Go in second, you activate Engage, add your Widow Anchor, negate a monster if you play against a combo deck. But also you can activate Engage and add Jamming Waves to play against something like Eldritch better into their board. And then Afterburner is nice because it can also out the Floodgates, and Skill Drain is a very annoying card for this deck to deal with. Let's talk about some non-engine cards that we play here as well. The dangers are basically just support for the Orcust engine. Sometimes you need an extender to get an additional body on board to go into your Galatea. And then Grepher and Armageddonite basically serve the same purpose, as well as Girsu. They are all starters that bring your Orcust monsters in the grave, but they have different names, so that's nice for Orbital Hydralander. Danger Mothman, of course, and then we play 2 Cold by the Grave, because it's nice against everything, and Maxi is just a terrible card to deal with. A 3 Upstart Goblin. This draws you a card and works really well with your Sky Striker spells. Just getting more spells in the grave is important for the Sky Striker cards. A Foolish Brawler is a 1-card starter as well as Rota. That's about it. Let's go over the extra deck. The only notable cards here are Link Spider. If you have Link Karibo, it's the better option. The reason we even play this in the first place is because Girsu can sometimes make a token on its own, right? It says if this card is normal summoned, you can send an Orcust card from your deck to the grave, and then if you control no other monsters, you can special summon a token to your opponent's field and your field. So the good thing about Girsu is that it sort of eliminates the problem of these that these other starters have, where you have to get another monster on board pretty much to make them work, unless you can send Harporo, of course, because this gets you the monster immediately, but Girsu gives you a monster on its own. So that's really nice. But the thing is, Galatea needs an effect monster to work. So you can't go with Girsu and the token into your Galatea. You need sort of a in-between step. Link Karibo is the best option, but I don't have it on this account yet. And Link Spider is sort of what I went for. But the thing is, if you use your Orcust effect, you are locked into dark monsters for the rest of the turn. And Link Spider is an earth monster. So if you've already used your Orcust effect, so if you summon the Girsu off your Harp Horror, you cannot make the token into your Link Spider. So that's why the Link Karibo is the better option. But for me, it was Link Spider, because this deck is quite expensive in general. And so I didn't have crafting points for the Link Karibo anymore. IP Mask Arena is a standard, just a standard thing that you go for on your turn 1 board. You will see this in the replays in just a minute. Nightmare Phoenix generic removal, Nightmare Unicorn generic removal, and Bolt Sword and Access Code to OTK. And Barricade Borg Blocker is a Link 2 generic, 2 monsters with different names. If it's Link Summoned, discard a card. The effect doesn't matter, that's the cost, and the cost is all we want, because we want to sometimes, if we have 2 danger monsters on the board, or something like a Symbol Skeleton with a danger monster, something like this, just be able to discard an Orcust Nightmare or the Orcust Harp Horror in order to be able to start playing with our Orcust cards. But I think that's enough talk. We've talked quite extensively about this. I already recorded this video yesterday, but I accidentally deleted over 1 hour of footage, and we grinded this deck for I think 10 hours 2 days ago, just to make platinum with this deck, so we can put it in the title and so that you guys yeah, just feel like it's sort of validated. So I'm excited to jump into the ladder with this deck again and see how it performs. Yesterday it performed already pretty well when I recorded the first try for this video, so without further ado, let's just get into those replays. Let's get it! Alright, let's see how this Orcust deck works out. A lot of you asked to have this gameplay footage sort of be played out live, so we're gonna try it for this video. We'll just do it live and see how it goes. We open Ash, Hydralander, Foolish, Widow, Anchor, as well as Orcust Ready Return. So you can already see the issue of the Orbital Hydralander. At this point, this is a brick in our hand, right? It doesn't really do anything. We have combo, but we don't have combo through a hand trap, and we need to give up the Ash for that, because our play here would be to activate Foolish Burial, get the Harp Horror in the grave, banish it, get Orcust Nightmare on the field, normal summon the Ash Blossom, and go into Galatea. But we could also just use Foolish, get Harp Horror in the grave, special Nightmare, use Orcust Ready Return, and hope that we draw something. But that's bad. That's not what we're gonna do. We start with Foolish anyway, and we're just gonna see if the Harp Horror goes through in the first place. Also, you will get the most authentic experience here with me if we're doing this live, right? So if I mess up, we're just gonna mess up. That's how it's gonna be. If we misclick, we're gonna misclick. And if our opponent completely destroys it and we brick, then I just have to deal with this. And that's just how it's gonna be. Alright, let's activate this Harp Horror in the grave. Now, in yesterday's replays, the Orbital Hydralander came in clutch. It was so good. So I'm going to be curious how it's going to turn out tomorrow. I really liked the replays from yesterday. I would have liked to show you those, but just accidentally deleted all the footage. So still not too familiar with all the YouTube things that are happening. The whole editing and stuff. Let's set the Widow Anchor, and that's all we can do for now. We have 2 interruptions. I mean, I suppose that's not the worst, and depending on what they play, it's not the worst in general. So they draw the Widow Anchor is nice also, not only because we can search it, but you see in a scenario like this, it's decent as well, where it's just like a regular interruption. Alright, they play the Numeron Network. That's honestly fine, because we don't have any monsters on the field. So if you don't know the Numeron cards, pretty much, if you have a monster on board, or multiple monsters on board, it's even worse, they get more attack as they attack the Numeron monsters. They can just special summon 4 out of the deck, and pretty much they're just going to attack, and because we don't have any monsters on the field, they don't get any effects. So as for now, this is alright. It depends on what else they're going to do. I mean, they can summon 1 more monster, but I doubt they can get another 4,000 on board. So yes, this is fine. Let's turn the toggle off, just so we don't give away any information. If we top deck something like an Orcust monster, this could work out really well. It depends, right? We need to top deck, that's for sure. And you see that, I mean, yeah, that's the thing about a card like Orbital Hydralander. If you want to play those bombs, of course they can be amazing in some hands, and they can be super bad in other hands. So I wouldn't play the Orbital, or if I were to play a tournament with the Orcust deck, I probably wouldn't play the Orbital Hydralander, but it's something super fun to play around with. And maybe we can do a video also on sort of a version of this deck where we play more of a very consistent version, I would say. But we're the best players anyway, and we draw Orcust Nightmare. Alright, let's see if they have another Ash. But even if they have, like, now we can play through a hand trap as well. If they have Ash here, right, they don't. Alright, boys, I think we can start playing here. Let's resolve this Abstract Goblin. Alright, Simple Skeleton, that's totally fine. Let's go with Rota. If they don't have any interruptions, maybe we can OTK them. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe we can OTK them. Let's see. Dark Grapher. We could. So Grapher says, I think I didn't explain this in the deck guide. So once per turn you can discard a dark monster and send another dark monster from your deck to the grave. So in comparison to something like Armageddon Knight that simply sends a dark monster on summon to the grave, a Grapher can send 2 if you need to, if you have a like dead Orcust monster in your hand, quote unquote. I think we want to go with Armageddon Knight, because if they have a hand trap, this is more likely to get hand trapped. And we want to get hand trapped at this point because we can play through it anyway with the Orcust Nightmare. So they cannot activate impermanence is something we have to be aware of because they have the numeral network on the field, but they could use something like Valor. But they seem to have a response, so we want to be aware of that. Let's send the World one so we can summon back the Harp Horror from the banished pile. Let's do this. Activate World Wand. And I'm playing this sort of freestyle here as well. I'm not entirely sure if this is the correct play, but you can roast me later in the comments if it's not. Alright. So usually this is the scenario that I talked about where we could go for Galatea now that we have two monsters, one of them being an Orcust monster. Alright, let's do this. Activate this, activate... Oh, sorry, not activate. Use this as link material, use this as link material. Go into Galatea. Now, next up, I would want to use Galatea, I think, already. And we put Babel on board. So getting Babel on board is more or less your most important... Like, it should be your highest priority, but they're going to use Ogre here. Let me finish this. Let me finish this thought process first. So, getting Babel on the field is usually your priority. Sometimes you want to get the Crescendo if you know you want to negate something on their turn, but having the Babel is so good. Just because the thing is, you can summon the Dingirsu. Remember, you can send a card your opponent controls to the grave. You can summon this with Symbol Skeleton on your opponent's turn. So this is a really sort of even the standard play, you could say. But they chain Ghost Ogre. What does that mean for us? I guess not too much, honestly, because the thing is. Wait, let me... did we just... did we do it? Alright, so here's the thing. I thought about activating the Orcust Nightmare before the Galatea, but I didn't see a reason for it. But now we got punished because our opponent had Ghost Ogre. And we could have used the Orcust Nightmare before targeting the Galatea, because now we don't have a monster on the field to target. But never mind, we can use the Harp Horror. Right, because we only used it last turn. See? That's what you get when you see me playing live these games. Alright, we can activate Harp Horror. Right, we can activate Harp Horror, so it's not going to be a problem at all, maybe. We can special out Girsu, which is pretty crazy. We can use Girsu's effect. Maybe. How many monsters do we have in the grave with different names? Only 3. Yeah, let's actually use the Girsu to send. I think the World one would be very nice, because this gives us an additional monster with a different name for Orbital Hydralander and gives us follow-up. Now, we could use the Girsu as well. We could use the Girsu as well to go into... to create a token. But are we locked into Dark Monsters yet? Yeah, we are. So we could not use the token... We could not use the Link Spider. So if we were to play Link Haribo, this would be much, much better, as mentioned in the profile. But we could still try to go for a Boral Sword OTK. Let's see, do they have to be special summon in defense position? They have. But we can pop it with Orbital Hydralander. You know what? I think we'll try to go for game. Because the thing is, I don't think they have Nibiru. Judging from that they're playing Numeron and they play Ghost Ogre and Ash as well. We're gonna go for Barricade Borg Blocker here. They have 9,000 life points is something we also want to keep in mind for sure. But with the Orbital Hydralander, like if we can get Orbital Hydralander on the field with... If we can get Orbital Hydralander on the field with Boral Sword Dragon, we will actually just win. Right? That's going to be game. Okay, so now our Hydralander is live. But I don't... There's no way to get into... There's no way to get into Boral Sword though, right? Let me see. We can activate the Symbol Skeleton and the Nightmare, but the Nightmare doesn't really do anything because we've already used all of the effects. I mean, it doesn't mean that the game's over or anything. In fact, I'm quite positive we will win this, but... The Orbital Hydralander is also, because it's not only an aggressive card, it's also a defensive card, right? That's the great thing about it. Maybe if we just go for... Alright, so I guess we just messed this up a bit, because we should have played a completely different game plan, but probably should have... We should have played a very control type-esque game plan, where we would have just gone for the what's it called? The IP Masquerena and have Dingirsu in the grave and stuff. But I think it's not lost quite yet. Our game plan, because we still have Babel up. We still have the option to go for Dingirsu. Should we want to go for that? Now let's actually count here. So Galatea, make those two into access code, destroy their numeral network because it's a bit annoying. But we could also go for Dingirsu and then go for Longirsu. I think that's the better play. And destroy the field spell with our Orbital Hydralander. So what I'm thinking is, we have two options here. We could go for access code talker, destroy their entire field, attack them for a lot of damage. It wouldn't be game because they have 9,000 life points. But it would be a bit weird because we would play an OTK game, but we can't OTK them, right? So what I'm thinking here is we're just going to go for Dingirsu. We're just going to go for Dingirsu. We're not going to try to push for OTK. It's not about doing a lot of damage. It's about getting control of this game at this point. We messed up, but it's fine. We're going to try to even it out now. So we want to attach one of our banished monsters. Yes, please. No, we don't want to chain anything. I would like to attach the Harp Horror, because the symbol skeleton we can get in the grave anyway. Now we go into the battle phase. We use in the battle phase to play around a Veiler that they probably don't have anyway. Alright, we just milled only spells and traps, so we're gonna destroy the numeral network so they don't have follow-up. Then we're going to attack their token with our barricade blocker. Well, we actually only summoned Dark Machines this turn apparently, because we can still activate Crescendo in our grave, which is pretty nice. And then we're going to go for, yeah, just a lot of damage here. And then in the main phase 2, that's what we're going to do. We're going to summon the Longirsu, because the great thing is the Longirsu also becomes a quick effect during their turn because of Babel. We put this on the field, and then we have 2 interruptions, 3 interruptions, 4 interruptions. We have the symbol skeleton with the Dingirsu in the grave. We have the Longirsu to send a linked monster to the grave. We have Orbital Hydralander, and we have Ash, and potentially even a Widow Anchor should they clear our Hydralander. But we also only have 4,000 life, so we really have to be careful at this point. You know, to lower the chance that we mill an Orcust Nightmare and get in a weird position, we're going to use the Orcust Crescendo now. Never mind, we can add another Orbital Hydralander to our hand and special summon that too. That is everything we wanted. You see, here's the thing. We would have had game if I... Alright, this goes back to one of my oldest videos that I made where it was about how to improve in Yu-Gi-Oh! Basically. Okay, they scoop. It's fine. But something I wanna... Let's talk about this for a second. So it's about a video that I made when I started out with YouTube. It was my first video where I talked about 5 tips that actually helped me improve in Yu-Gi-Oh! And one of them being that sometimes you sort of mind game yourself, right? You know there's a lot of cards in the game that can interact with your cards. Something like Effect Veiler that I was afraid just now. Even though there was maybe not even a reason to be scared of Effect Veiler, because they would have thrown Effect Veiler on any other card in the turn previously. They would never have waited for Orbital Hydralander to activate. But still, I try to play around the Veiler just in case. But it then happens to happen that I mill an Orcust Crescendo, and we only summoned Orcust monsters this turn, basically, or only Dark Machine monsters, and you cannot activate this trap effect in the grave if you've summoned anything other than Dark Machine monsters, but we only summon Dark Machine monsters, which is not always the case with the Orcust deck. And that's maybe also why I didn't consider this option. And we milled it, and we actually could have searched the Orbital Hydralander in the main phase 1, special summon it, use the Orcust Nightmare in the grave, boosted by 800 attack, one of them, and they had only 3,400 life left. So with what we had on board, with the additional Orbital Hydralander, we would have had game. So it's just another example of how you can sometimes mind game yourself and how you should really think about those plays that you're making. Alright, this is a complete brick. Let's draw a card, see how this turns out. I'm not making the best advertisement for this deck at all. Guys, this will happen. It will happen. But this is unfair, come on. Like, this is not likely. This is not likely at all. All of the utility cards in one hand. We play enough starters, I feel like. We play Rota, we play Girsu, Armageddon Knights, we play Dangers, we play Grapha. We have enough starters in the deck. And also Engage, it's like sort of a starter. So this is not very likely to happen. And also when I played this deck until Platinum so far, like I went on, I think, a 20 win streak from Gold to Platinum. So all in all, really nice. Ooh, they're playing Thunder Dragons. Let's go. The thing is, we don't have any responses. And they're probably just going to OTK us. I don't want to make you sit through the entire combo, I'm sorry. I hope this is fine. They're gonna, you know, use Colossus, go into Titan. I think this is just OTK on board, right? 3000, 36. This is gonna be 6-8, 7-8. But they just don't attack. You know, this happened to me a lot in the TCG already. Funnily enough, when my opponent simply passes on their first turn, I kind of forget that they even had a turn. So I just forget to attack usually. Let's see. Is there anything we can do? Do they have... How many Thunder Monsters do they have? 2 in the grave. Yeah, they have a Matrix in their hand. Okay, so... we can use Foolish first, I suppose. And try to make something happen. Probably not gonna be able to do anything. And they have a response to that. That's not good. Let's see. We're gonna go for Harp Horror here. We are going to want to... maybe even use Harp Horror. Alright, so here's what I'm thinking. We used Upstart already. We could try to go for... so Afterburner clears the Buster Lock. I think we have to Harp Horror and then try to Orchestrate Return or draw something ridiculous. But if they have Ash as well, we're probably do... like, if they have Ash, we can... that's also not the best thing, Maxi. But if they had Ash here, we could have insta-scooped, I think. But alright, let's see. We'll go for Girsu. I think Girsu will trigger. Which maybe that was a mistake, because maybe now they can chain Valor as well if they have it. But also this gives us an additional name in the grave for Orbital Hydralander. But the thing is also that Orbital Hydralander isn't really doing anything here, because those cards can't be destroyed. So I really need... I honestly really need Widow Anchor. We really need Widow Anchor. I think that's the main thing that we need here. Widow Anchor and then Dingirsu to get rid of one of them. Right, don't ash me. Don't ash me. I believe that we also... Alright, they have Ash. Alright, this is a scoop, boys. It is what it is. It is what it is. We rig sometimes. But that's also the sad part about the best of one format, in my opinion, is that in the TCG, you could definitely play a deck like this, because you can afford to brick in one of the games if your deck has a lot more power than your opponent's. If your deck is very powerful, but it's not as consistent, you can maybe go through in a best of 3 format. But in a best of 1 format, you break once, you're out. So, I think that's one of the things that man, I would just love a best of 3 format. I know a lot of you guys, and me including, I completely understand it. The best of 1 format, it's quick, it's easy for Konami, it's nice in some regards, right? It's good for like quick testing. You just want to see if your deck works out or not, and then go on with your day. You can also just spend like half an hour in the game and get a game in. But for the competitive aspect, which I'm definitely a competitive player in the TCG base, I really like the competitive aspect about these games. It's one of the things that drives me to even play it in the first place. For me, this is definitely missing. The best of 3 format is something that is super important. Side ticking is important. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a card game that is so heavily reliant on the dice roll. And the cards you draw, we don't have a mulligan in the game as in Magic, where in Magic the best of 1 format kind of works out. When I played Magic Arena, I never really had too many problems. You know, when I went second or first, of course you had maybe a bit of an advantage, but it wasn't a make or break, I would say. But in Yu-Gi-Oh! It definitely is. So let's see what they're going to do about this. I really hope for the tournaments there, the events that they're going to host, which we haven't heard anything about that so far, but I'm confident we will hear something soon. I'm just hoping that they bring the best of 3 for that at least. Alright, our opponent plays the Invoke deck. But they play a Shadow version. El Shadow Fusion comes down, so I really enjoy this deck. A couple of videos on my channel as well about it from the TCG. So they're in fact going to go for something like Window or Construct here. They're going to use Wendy and Alistair from the hand to go for Window. Well, this is perfect. Alright, they put the Window right in front of our face. Unless they hard drew the Schism here, or they have Nadir Servant in their hand, or maybe even Maximus. This is probably pretty good for us. They trigger the Wendy, of course, which means they can special summon any Shadow monster from their deck face down. Probably going to go for Beast. Beast lets you draw 2 cards and discard a card when it gets flipped up. Yep, they're going to summon that. So that's the normal play for Shadow. But now they cannot summon the Maximus anymore. And they just pass. So this should be, unless they have any weird hand trap, this should be a very easy win. Like I can just tell you, I can tell you our hand is so broken. We have Orbital Hydralander as a bomb. We have a starter. We have an extender. We have a way to break their board. This is insane. But we still have to think about how we're going to play this out, right? You can special summon this by discarding a level 5 or higher dark monsters. It would be amazing if, in addition to negating their entire board, we could force them to discard a card with Mecha Blast. So this card says, once per turn when your opponent activates any effect, you can send a card of the same type as that activated effect from your hand to the grave and negate the activation. And this is cost to discard the card. So if we can make it so they discard the card and then chain droplet, they lose a card from their hand. For nothing, basically. That would be amazing. How can we make this? Probably by normal summoning the Greffer. And we don't really need the normal summon anyway. We have Nightmare. We have Droplet to get rid of those cards. So I am fairly confident. Normal summon the Greffer. And see how they react. Alright, so they have a they have a response. So there's only one unknown card. And the only card you can activate in a open game state, I believe, if you're under 5 summons, is Max C. So we're going to have to rethink how to play this turn, because this changes a lot. I think we want to... I think we want to discard the Orcust Nightmare. That's of course all assuming that they have the Maxi in fact in hand. But I'm very confident. I'm very confident they have Maxi. We don't want to activate the Nessie because this will get rid of our Droplet. Potentially, and we need the Droplet. Let's activate the Harp Horror and see how this, like how they're gonna respond. Because also they have Window on board, so they know I can only special summon once per turn from their perspective. Of course, we know we have Droplet, but they don't know that. So I'm curious whether or not they want to Max C here as a 1-for-1 trade. The Alistair in their hand can obviously also be activated in an open game state because it has a second effect where you can discard it to target a fusion monster and boost it by 1,000. Alright, boys. I guess we don't have to fear Max C as much. It's still good that we tried to think about how to play around it, but that's what I just realized, alright? I think at this point, that's where a Twitch chat would come in really handy, where people could help me out. Telling me I'm talking about stupid stuff here. Alright, let's see. Gonna summon Girsu, I suppose. Getting an additional name in the grave will be crucial here. Using that effect, and now this will be the time where they're probably going to activate the Mechaba, I still think. Yes, and then we can chain the Droplet, getting rid of... Okay, they discard the Alistair. That's interesting. Let's see, what do we want to get rid of? I guess Nessie as well as Simple Skeleton. Yes. Nessie and Simple Skeleton. And then Orbital Hydralander as our bomb that we drop. And that's... I mean, that's just insane, right? Get the World Wand here. We're gonna go for Galatea. But potentially with the Harp Horror. Yeah, actually, let's summon out Harp Horror first. Let's summon out Harp Horror first. Go into Galatea with the Greffer and the Harp Horror. Because we want to keep Girsu on the field. It has 100 attack more. And it has an additional effect where you can special summon a monster. So having... And this and the Orcust Harp Horror is of course also better in the graveyard. So let's use Greffer and the Harp Horror to go into our Galatea. And we want to think about this carefully. Go for Galatea, use the effect. Do we have 5 monsters on in the grave as well? We do. Alright, so we can already summon the Hydralander. Set the Orchestrated Babel, because this is going to be our way to ensure that our Hydralander always goes through. They could have something like Shadow Fusion. If we don't OTK them, we have to be aware of that. But I honestly think we can OTK them. Right, we have so much gas. But also we already used Harp Horror and World Wand at this point. We use Hydralander, destroy the face down monster, go into Boral Sword here, use Symbol Skeleton in the grave, summon back Galatea, go for Dingirsu, send one of them to the grave, attack for game. Yeah, that should work, right? We mill 3. We don't have multiples with the same name. See, we mill the World Wand, which is also nice for follow-up. So now we destroy the beast. So this is going to be OTK unless they draw a hand trap or something of that matter. But if they draw into Ash, Ash is dead at this point. Ash is not going to do anything. They draw a card. We're going to go for Boral Sword. And that's also why I think that Boral Sword is still such a good and important card in the Orcust deck. And something you also want to keep in mind is that, I would rather say that you want to just think about is how it's... Oh, they have a response. So we just think that they draw into another Alistair. I think that's more likely. That's more likely to assume, because we can't know whether or not they even play Nibiru, even, especially maybe because it's a very... it's not the most popular card as of right now. Okay, they drew Maxi. That's completely fine, completely fine. Have your Maxi, we special summon twice and we just OTK you anyway. It doesn't matter. But the thought process that I had earlier that I wanted to finish is that you should never be afraid to even link off your boss monsters like this, right? Because linking off the Orbital Hydralander, I know it feels incredibly bad because it's such a powerful card on its own and you don't really want to give up on it, especially because it's a defensive card during your opponent's turn as well. But if you see the line to go for OTK and you have no real reason to be scared of anything, just go for it, right? Send a card they have to the grave. We can send the Winder. It doesn't really matter. They can add back the Shadow Fusion. That's fine. Yes, add back the Shadow Fusion. And then we attack for game. It seems like this is just going to be OTK. Yep. Now, nice thing you also want to... As you can see here, the game asks us a couple of times whether or not we want to use the Orcust Nightmare in the grave. And you want to keep in mind that you can also use the Orcust Nightmare in the damage step. So if your opponent attacks your monster... now we don't want to get into the specifics of the damage step. Maybe that's for no whole video, maybe at some point. But if your opponent attacks your monster in the damage step, you can activate the Orcust Nightmare to boost the attack. And your opponent can't like undo that attack. They can't cancel this attack and they just run into your monster if they forget that your Orcust Nightmare is in the grave with the Babel up on the field as a quick effect. Alright, nice clean victory. Let's get this last game. Still in Platinum 5. I think today we're gonna... I'm still gonna grind this game out so we can put Platinum 1 in the title at least. So... And I think this deck will definitely be able to go into Plat 1. I think you can see that the consistency is definitely an issue to some degree, but you can definitely cut the Orbital Hydralander and put consistency cards in there. This is of course... as mentioned many times, I think now in the video, it's just like a nice tech card that you can also add. You can also just play one Hydralander as well, just to search it with your Orcust Crescendo. Alright, we know the plays already, boys. We go for Armageddon Knight, put the Orcust Harp Horror in the grave. And of course I was bad because I should have obviously activated Orchestrated Return first, because now I'm going to draw into Engage and get punished because I already have a monster in the main monster zone. Unfortunately not, right? Would have been deserved. We're gonna summon Girsu, get an additional monster in the grave as previously. And these plays are always going to be the same. And maybe if our opponent didn't open a hand trap, we can show the sort of quote-unquote standard combo for the Orcust deck now. So we're gonna go into our Galatea here with these two monsters. Because the nice thing with the usual end board, your Skystriker Widow Anchor, for example, is live as well, because you end on just IP with everything else being in your grave. So let's play around the Ogre that our opponent had a couple of games ago, right? So we don't get punished. So we use the Orcust Nightmare. Get in the grave our Symbol Skeleton, exactly. Then we use our World Wand. get it. Now, you can think about whether or not you want to summon Nightmare, Harp Horror. There's probably an advantage for one of them. But it depends, right? If you don't already have Skeleton, which we already have it, it would be better to summon out the Nightmare probably. But because we already have the Skeleton, I almost think it's better to summon out the Harp Horror, because this gives you an additional body during your opponent's turn if we have the Babel up on the field for IP Masquerena. So now we're going to activate the Galatea. With Galatea, I will shuffle back the World Wand. We put the Babel on the field. Don't forget to activate the Babel as well. Then go into our Dingirsu, which we summon over the Galatea now. Put it in defense here. Doesn't matter where. Just anywhere. Nice little animation. And then we use the Dingirsu to attach the Orcust Nightmare that we have in our banished pile as well. The reason why I said maybe it would have been better to get the to shuffle back the Orcust Nightmare, not the World Wand, was maybe if we now use the Orbital Hydralander, we summon it. You know, maybe we mill 2 Orcust Nightmares, so we can't even if we use one as a quick effect, we cannot get all of them out of the grave. But it's very unlikely to happen. But of course, if possible, you want to avoid these sort of scenarios. Now, one of the things you can even do here is, because we have Nightmare and Skeleton in the grave, you can use your Skeleton now as well. Just because, yeah, and summon back the Galatea. Just because this will give you the option to use Galatea during your opponent's turn as well, of course. Being able to set the counter trap during their turn, and this also gives you additional material for the IP Masquerena. And also makes it so that you don't mill a second Skeleton with your Orbital Hydralander and basically have that issue. So we summoned the Orbital Hydralander, we set Droplet, we set the Widow Anchor. Let's see how many interruptions we could put up. So we have IP Masquerena, we have in our grave the Symbol Skeleton in just a moment with the Dingirsu. That's 2 interruptions, makes it 3 interruptions with Hydralander, 4 interruptions with Droplet, 5 with Ash, and then potentially even a 6th if we clear our field with IP Masquerena with the Widow Anchor. This is super nice, and this is not even talking about how we have a lot of follow-up in the grave. So I think, yeah, this is sort of the standard turn 1 board. I'm glad we could show it off here as well. And they played Drytron, so this is a nice matchup where we can also test our how we interact with them. Now watch me the next 7 minutes during their turn stumble a lot with my words because I have to think quite hard about this. Interrupting Drytron is so awkward all the time because there's not really a choke point for them. But one thing I want to do is, just because of the toggle button, is we want to use the Nightmare already now. Yes, get the Symbol Skeleton in the grave. Boost our IP by 300. Because Symbol Skeleton has level 3. They add Benton, of course. They use Nova. They already have Benton. So ashing Alpha doesn't make sense. I think at this point you just hope they don't have too many Drytron names, so you just ash this, right? That seems reasonable to me. Also something you could think about is putting Apollosa in there. Alright, they chain Cold by the grave. Let me finish my thought first. You could think about putting old Apollosa in the extra deck as well, just because you can go into it with IP, and in a matchup like this, of course, super good. They have the Cold by the grave, so that means they're probably pretty reliant on this Nova resolving, which we can't really do anything about. Let's chain the Galatea, because usually in the TCG I wouldn't chain this card right here. I don't really see a reason for it, but in this game specifically, with all the toggling and when you can activate certain effects and when they tell you, oh, do you want to activate this or do you want to activate this, makes it a bit weird, so I'll better be safe than sorry. However, now we have an additional Symbol Skeleton in the deck as well that we don't really want to mill with our Orbital Hydralander. But it's not gonna happen, right, Copium? I suppose they would get out Zeta, because Zeta is usually the one that they combo off with. Exactly. They get the Zeta. You know what? It was a mistake that we set the Widow Anchor, because we would need a card in hand for our IP Masquerena for Unicorn right now. We would really need that right now. Well, I guess that's how it is. They're going to normal summon Diviner. Interesting. Do we do something about this? Oh, this is so difficult. I guess I guess you kind of wanna, but they already have Benton in their hands, so... I was thinking for a second that we could use the Droplet to get rid of our Crescendo, negating this, using Crescendo, get a card in the hand from our deck, but then we can't go into Unicorn, because we can only summon Dark Machine monsters during that turn. I still think that Droplet is correct, though, because there's not really anything else on the Drytron turn that they scoop. I'm not gonna complain. We had a lot of interruptions though. We didn't know their hand. If their hand was something like a second Nova maybe, and then maybe the ritual spell or something. I mean, I guess wasn't too good. I would have loved to see their hand as well. I would have loved to see their hand to be able to tell whether or not they just scooped because they had to go or something, or because we were actually so good with our interruptions. No, but seriously, we should have kept one card in our hand. That would have been the play for sure. Alright, let's get into sort of a review. Well, I hope you try out the deck for yourself. It's pretty fun to play around with. Orbital Hydralander, best card ever. Let me know how you like the sort of live commentary for the gameplay. It's a lot of fun for me as well. Like I'm fine with both. I think both are fun to do. And other than that, I just hope you enjoyed the video as always, and I will see you in the next one very, very soon. I think Tri-Brigade Zodiac is the next deck we're gonna cover in just 3 days from now, as per usual. Alright, I'll see you in the next one. See you.